Hello, everyone. And in about a minute and a half, I'm going to start sharing some material from one of my books. But right now, we're just doing a check to see if everything is working. And sometimes we have trouble with the technology, but it looks like today everything is going to work. So in just about a minute or so, we're going to start. And in the meantime, it's, get ready, find yourself a chair, and get prepared to learn a little bit about what 4-H work was. And what those of us who were 4-H members, what we did when we were kids. Because the story I'm going to tell you is a story about, it's a true story, and it's something that occurred when I was 12 years old, which is a few years ago, quite a few years ago, I might say. So are you, we're about ready. In about a half a minute, we're going to start. And I notice that a few people are already joining, and I hope a lot of you will tune in, because I think this is a pretty good story, but who am I to say I wrote it? Okay, here we go. We're about 15 seconds or so away from starting time, and if you're all ready to go, I am ready to go. I'm looking at my watch, and it's now 10 o'clock, and good morning, everyone. It's me again, Jerry Yapps, and I am here to share a story from one of my books called Stormy. And that's me, and that's my 4-H calf. And this is a story, a true story, something that happened a lot of years ago when I was a beginning 4-H member. And some of you probably are wondering what 4-H is all about. Well, one of the symbols of 4-H is the 4-leaf clover with an H on every corner. And if you're wondering what the H's stand for, well, I'll tell you. Head, heart, hands, and health. I remember that as well as, we recited that as part of the pledge, the 4-H pledge when I was a member. And by the way, I know some of you are probably already 4-H members. And if you are interested in becoming a 4-H member, all you have to do is contact your county extension office. And they will tell you how you can become a 4-H member. Okay, so on to Stormy, a story about my 4-H calf. Sadie's calf will be yours to keep, Pa said. It seems right for you to have something for helping with the summer planting and harvesting. I was thrilled. My very own calf. I could raise the heifer calf as a 4-H club project and take it to the county fair and maybe win a ribbon. When she is grown, she will become my first cow. When I grow up and become a farmer, Sadie's girl calf will be a part of my dairy herd. At 12, Pa thinks I'm old enough to have my own calf. That's how Pa started his dairy herd, with one cow. I could do the same. I couldn't wait for the calf's birth. Sadie would have the heifer in January, just 5 months from now. Now here's a picture. Here's a picture of my dad and me, and we're standing by the fence and we're looking out at the cattle grazing in the pasture. And we're talking about the fact that Sadie is going to have my first calf. Okay, now let's go ahead to January. On a January evening, snow swirled around the corner of the barn and drifted in front of the door, making it nearly impossible for me to yank it open. It was evening milking time. Pa went out to the barn earlier than me with the milk cans. He hadn't been ahead of me for more than 15 minutes, and already his tracks in the snow were covered. They disappeared. The wind had come up from the northwest and the temperature had begun falling. I kicked aside the snow, carefully holding the kerosene lantern in one hand. until I could crack open the door enough to squeeze through. I was wondering when Sadie's calf would be born. There's a picture of me going to the barn door with my lantern and kicking aside the snow to enter the barn door. It was warm inside the barn because of the cows and the horses, a pleasant contrast to the weather outside. The cattle stood quietly in their stanchions, eating corn silage as they waited to be milked. Along with the warmth and quiet, there were many smells. The smell of silage, something like vinegar, mixed with the smell mixed with that of fresh oat straw, and the pungent odor of cow manure. I hung my lantern on a nail behind the cows. Stormy night, I said. Yup, Pa answered. Sometimes Pa didn't say much, but often you could tell his meaning by the expression on his face. Tonight he looked concerned, and now here we are in the barn, my dad and I, and we are talking about the weather and about the fact that tonight, maybe, Sadie would be having my first calf. All right, let's go on to see what happens. See anything different about Sadie tonight? Pa asked. Sadie was a big, mostly black Holstein that stood halfway to the lineup of 15 cows that made up our milking herd. No, I answered. Well, it looks like she'll be having her calf tonight, Pa said. I walked to where Sadie was standing in her stall. She was fidgeting a little, and she hadn't eaten much of her feed. Could be, I said, not able to predict near as well as Pa when an animal would give birth. I was excited beyond words. Sadie's calf was going to be my calf. Finally, the time had come. I was thinking about what girl's name I would give her. The wind had slowed down some when Pa and I returned to the barn around 9 that evening. A nearly full, cold moon hung in the clear black sky. Pa carried the lantern that cast long shadows over the snowdrifts that had piled up against the side of the barn. The temperature was still dropping. I could feel the cold on my ears, even with my warm cap and ear flaps. I could hear my knee-high boots crunching on the snow. And then here are the pictures when we're out in the barn and we're going back out to the barn at night. Because this is the night that my calf is going to be born, on a cold, wintry night. Well, indeed, the calf was born. And as we walked to the house, Pa said, "You look like you lost your last friend." I was hoping for a heifer calf. I said, you know what happened? Sadie had a boy calf, a bull calf. I had my heart set on a heifer, and then this big bull comes along. And Pa said, "Don't always get what you want. Sometimes it's for the better. You never know. This may be one of those times." I didn't say anything as I walked with my head down, kicking clumps of snow with my boot, and there I'm walking to the house, all dejected and kicking the snow with my boot. Well, I was at the next morning, the breakfast table, where Pa asked what name I wanted for my bull calf. I hadn't thought about it. I had a heifer's name all picked out. I was going to call the calf Sue. I liked that name. I hadn't even considered a bull's name, for heaven's sakes. "I don't know," I grumbled. My 8-year-old twin brothers, Don and Daryl, had several suggestions. "Call him Bill," Don said. "I think Ben is a good name," Daryl said. Finally, I said, "I think I'll name him Stormy." He was born during a big storm. "That's a good name," Pa replied. Ma nodded in agreement. So there we are at the breakfast table, talking about a name for my little calf. Well, what's going to happen next? I wonder, huh? Stormy grew rapidly. By late April, when he was 4 months old, he nearly came up to my shoulder. He was the biggest calf in the barn. I fed him every day, and we had become acquainted. We were a long way from becoming friends, though. I still wished he'd been a heifer. I tried teaching Stormy to lead with a rope and a halter, but he was stubborn. He refused to move. He insisted on going where he wanted to go, not where I wanted him to go. As my 4-H project Stormy had to know how to lead. Otherwise, I couldn't take him to the county fair, try and win a ribbon. I had to find a way to teach him. What I was doing just didn't work, but I couldn't give up. Now you can see where I am trying to teach him how to lead in this picture. And this one, of course, is I'm talking about how he's growing rapidly. So I have a big challenge on my hand. Mind you, I'm 12 years old. And this little bull calf, he's dragging me around the yard, and he doesn't want to learn how to lead, and I don't know what I'm going to do. It was early May. A soft breeze was blowing from the west when we walked from the barn to the house for breakfast. New leaves were pushing out on the elm tree that stood near the kitchen porch. There was green grass growing on the south side of the house. A meadowlark called from the field by the road. "Think we're in for a bad storm," Pa said. "Air just don't feel right." I looked at the sky. It sure didn't look like stormy weather to me. So there we're looking at the sky, and Pa's talking about the bad weather coming along. I walked home from school that afternoon, my eyes half closed. The air was filled with dust. When I got home, the howl of the wind was everywhere. The straw stack in back of the barn, what was left of it after providing cattle bedding all winter, was scattered across the yard. Small tree limbs had blown off from the elm tree near the kitchen porch. A large tree limb had cracked off the apple tree in the front yard. Pa didn't say much about the storm as we ate supper. We all remembered windstorms that damaged crops and trees and farm buildings. My brother Don asked if we were having a tornado. It's just a windstorm," Pa answered. It's just a windstorm. But I could see worry on Pa's face, and Ma's too. And so here's where we're talking about that at the table. What's happening next now with the storm? In the barn for the evening milking, I noticed that the animals were uneasy. Sensing the storm outside, Frank and Charlie, our draft horses, pawed the floor in their stalls. The cattle were not eating as much as usual. Fanny, our farm dog, lay in back of the cows, her head resting on her paws and her ears down. She could hear the wind and sense the power of the storm. Stormy seemed his usual self. He bounced around the calf pen and trotted over to lick my hand when I approached. I crawled up in the haymow ladder to pitch down hay for the cattle. Upstairs in the nearly empty barn, the sounds of the storm were everywhere. Oak beams creaked and cracked. The big doors through which we hauled hay rattled and shuddered with each gust of wind. Usually the haymow was a quiet, peaceful place, filled with the cooing of pigeons and the soothing sound of breezes blowing outside. But this evening, the haymow was a place of frightening, ear-splitting sounds as the barn stood tall in the wind and protested every gust. There I'm upstairs in the barn, pitching down hay for the cattle. Well, the wind is blowing outside, the menacing wind. The wind continued all night, rattling the windows in the house and making eerie, scary sounds like wild animals howling. In the dull dawn of the following morning, I awakened to Pa's shouting, "Come quick, the barn's tipping over, the barn's tipping over." I grabbed up my clothes and I ran along the long hallway and down the stairs to the kitchen. Ma was there to greet me. "Go help your pa, the barn's going over," Ma said with fright written all over her face. She was cranking the telephone. Many small rings to inform the neighbors that we needed help. Everyone answered a general ring when they heard it. "This is Eleanor Epps. The wind is blowing over our barn," I heard Ma scream into the phone. "The wind is blowing over our barn." There's my mother at the telephone. Very different kind of telephone than we have today. It was fastened to the wall and she had to talk into it. What's going on with this storm and what's it affecting us? The barn going over. I met Pa at the barn door. "West wall is down, calves are buried, beams laying on top of the cows. Whole thing is going over. When it goes, it will kill everything." "Help me with the beam," Pa said. Together we slowly dragged the huge beam off the backs of the cows. Its weight had knocked several of them to the floor. "Start letting out the cows," Pa said. I began opening stanchions and releasing cows at one end of the barn, the part of the barn that still seemed intact. Pa worked on the other end, one section that was likely to topple any minute. Cows were belling, the horses were rearing in their stalls. The herd bull with part of the barn wall collapsed around him was roaring in a fearful rage. The calves, some of them buried to their necks in debris, bawled in pain. Above the sound of the disaster, there's a howl of the wind. The never-ending wind that had blown since the previous day without stopping. There we are in the barn with the beam down and the cattle injured and everything in trouble in our old barn with this terrible storm. With the cows outside, I ran to the calf pen in search of Stormy. I found him in the far corner of the pen, his head covered with loose hay and his back half buried in rubble. I uncovered his head and back. He was still alive, but the spirited look in his eyes was gone. "I need help with the calves," I yelled. Pa was untying the horses and leading them outside. Frantically, I grabbed at the broken cement blocks that had been part of the barn wall and dug in the dirt to uncover my buried calf. Pa arrived and helped me free Stormy and drag him from the pen to the outside. Stormy couldn't stand, and he was breathing with great difficulty. By the time we had freed Stormy and taken him outside, several neighbors had arrived. John and Roman Macheski arrived first. They constructed a makeshift pen of wooden snow fence to hold Stormy. He was lying on fresh straw that someone had placed in the pen. His neck was stretched out and his eyes closed. I put his head on my lap and rubbed his neck. He opened his eyes, but they were cloudy, and I didn't think he could see me. And so you can see here, there's Stormy, and I'm not looking very happy, because it was not a very happy time, to be sure. Well, twice that night I got up and went out to check on Stormy. I tried to feed him some milk I had set aside. The next morning, Stormy was still alive, but just barely. "Probably should put your calf to sleep," Pa said. "He's in a lot of pain and likely won't ever walk again." I could see a spark of life in Stormy's eyes that Pa couldn't see. The little bull was looking at me in a way that only I could understand. It was at this moment that I understood how I felt about Stormy. Somebody I didn't think I needed or could learn from him turned out to be what I needed most. "Just a few more days," I pleaded. "I think I know how to help Stormy get better." "A few more days," Pa said. From that moment on, Stormy and I developed a special friendship. I fed him several times a day. I rubbed his injured back and legs while all the time talking to him, encouraging him. His appetite slowly improved. One day, a few weeks later, I noticed he was trying to stand. I put my arms around his middle and lifted for a few seconds. He stood on wobbly legs. Later that week, he took his first steps since the accident. He walked slowly and unsteadily, but got better as each day passed. In July, after 3 months of hard work, he could run again. Imagine that. And you know what? I should show you this picture of where I'm leading him. See, there he's up and moving. And I'm now very happy because I'd almost lost him. And guess what? I took him to the county fair. In August, Stormy was fully recovered and stood higher than my shoulder. Together, we went to the county fair. And what fun it is for a 4-H kid to go to the county fair. I felt proud as we walked around the 4-H show ring. The cattle judge handed me a first prize ribbon. As much as I wanted the ribbon, I realized that what I had learned from Stormy that summer was most important. And there we are at the county fair, and the judge is giving me the blue ribbon. And that's the story of Stormy, my 4-H calf, who everyone thought was not going to survive that terrible, terrible time when our barn about blew over and caused all kinds of havoc. And it was my dad who allowed me to nurse this calf back to life. And what a fantastic summer that was. Now I want to show you several things and talk about something very special that you can do. I already mentioned about 4-H and Head, Heart, Hands, and Health, and how you could become a 4-H member if you wanted to. I want to show you also, that's a blue ribbon. This one happens to be from the Stoughton Fair. I didn't take Stormy to the Stoughton Fair. I took him to the Sheriff County Fair. But this is a blue ribbon. And I was so thrilled to receive this blue ribbon at the county fair when Stormy he couldn't even stand up. And just imagine, I was able to win a blue ribbon with him. Then someone gave me this little statue, and they said, "That's you with Stormy," and it's the cutest little thing. I've got it on my shelf here in my office, and I look at it every so often. And that little guy with his calf, you notice you probably can't see it. And I can't get it close enough. Yeah, you can't do it. He's got a first prize ribbon tied on to his overalls, which is just as cute as can be. Then some of you probably are wondering, well, what did the real Stormy look like? Well, this is the real Stormy. And that's me when I'm 12 years old, and that's Stormy, my bull calf. This happens to be the picture on the cover of another of my books called Limping Through Life. Some of you might want to find it interesting to read that book as well, because that talks more about Stormy, and it also talks about a lot of other things. So Limping Through Life is a chance to see what the real Stormy was about. But now, the very special thing I have for you. But let's hold on. I got another thing to share. In terms of what can you do? What can you do yourself? What can you do now? Many of you have pets. I know you do. And some of you are probably 4-H members, and you have 4-H project. One of the things I would encourage you to do is to write a story about your pet. Write it down. Write about something, a little story about something that happened with your pet, dog, cat, gerbil, whatever it might be. Just as I wrote about Stormy and how I had learned so much from that experience. We all learn from our interactions with our pets and other animals. There's no way away from it. Sometimes we learn that without even knowing it. So write that down. You might find that interesting. But now, the special treat I have for you. Here is a coloring page. And it's a fantastic coloring page. My daughter Susan teaches at Falk School here in Madison. And the art teacher at Falk School, Sheila Zenk, she drew this picture for us just for this show. And she did just a wonderful job. It's now a picture that you can download and you can color it. And now here's another part of the treat. Our neighbor just across the way from us, the little girl, 8 years old, and her name is Isla Hansen. And we asked Isla, would you like to draw this? Would you like to color this picture for us? Because I'll show it on TV, on their computer. And she said, sure. And now here is the picture that Isla drew. Isn't that a wonderful picture? Me, my calf, the red barn in the background, and the windmill. Isla did just a wonderful job putting this. Let me back there. You can see it all. She even wrote her name down in the corner. See that? Isla Hansen. A wonderful picture. So I hope you've enjoyed this little discussion of what it's like to have a calf that's injured and nursed back to health and what you learned from that. I hope you enjoyed, and maybe you want to read this book. You can buy it, it's available from your bookstores, or you can order it from the Wisconsin Historical Society Press site. So thank you again for watching this morning and listening and allowing me to share another story from one of my books. It's always fun doing this. Stay well, stay interested, and we'll see you soon. Bye now.